The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, hey, welcome everyone. Thank you guys for joining us for the Pass the Mic Students Discuss Equity and Civics virtual panel for South by Southwest EDU. My name is Amber Coleman-Mortley. I'm the Director of Social Engagement at iCivic, and I'm super excited to have each and every one of you guys join us for this very important discussion on civic education. So I'd like for our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll go in order of Anaya, Alex, and then Jaden. So please introduce yourselves to our listeners. Anaya and Alex.
Did you guys hear me?
Please. No, we did not.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Anaya Bankston, and I am a junior at Oakland Technical High School in Oakland, California.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jaden Deal. I'm a first year at Harvard University, originally from Des Moines, Iowa, where I currently am now.
Hi, my name is Alex Henderson. I'm a junior in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I go to LSU Laboratory High School.
Awesome. All right, so we're just going to have a very interesting discussion. We'll start off with talking about equity. So my first question will be for each and every one of our panelists to kind of go through really quickly and share their insights. But you know, equity is a huge buzzword right now. So how would you define equity in civic education? We'll start with Anaya.
Yeah, so I think equity in civic education just means providing students with a relevant and high quality civic curriculum just to bring diversity and cultivate trust in a civic community or classroom.
So I believe equity in civic education means that everybody is getting a quality education across the board, no matter your socioeconomic situation, no matter what high school you go to, everybody should be learning the same basic things in civic education.
Yeah, and I would even bring in a teaching standpoint and say that anyone that's not been brought into the conversation to create the civic education curriculum, like we need to see more teachers, more people who are making the textbooks and everything, bringing in marginalized communities to also have conversations there as well.
Awesome. So you guys bring up some really great points here. So we'll move into our next question for each and every one of you guys. So why is equity in civic education so important, especially right now, right? Like, why is it even important? And then, you know, maybe let's talk a little bit about how it's linked to other student interests.
Yeah, I can start on this. The importance of civic education, everybody needs to be taught how to be a good citizen. It's the basic foundation of our society. It's what everybody goes off of when we go to the polls and we start voting and all of those things. So it's incredibly important that we're actually educated about the systems which govern us because they control our entire lives. What was the second part of your question, Amber?
Yeah, so how is it attached then to student interest?
So student interest, more generally talking about, I'm going to take a little bit of a different route with this. So say a student's interested in science. You think that science and civics can't be connected in any way. But actually what you'll end up seeing is that I always use this example with going down to a public park and testing the water and finding a way to make the water better. That's a science experiment in a way, but it's also contributing back to the community and giving back in some way. So what you end up seeing here is that students' interests are actually intricately tied with the communities that they're serving. And even in that way, that would be considered civics because it's interdisciplinary.
Yeah, I think Jaden brought up a really good point there. Civics is obviously very important, and especially I think during the time it's important that students do have civic education just so students can understand how they can create an impact in their community, how they can advocate for themselves, how to navigate around things that go on in our democracy. And sometimes being so young, you don't know what action you should take to create the necessary change you would like to see. And I think as Jaden said, civics definitely can link to any of students' interests. If you're in sports, I know that a lot of students in sports do community service hours. You talk to your community, you may get your classmates engaged in something that's important. But I think it also sparks new interest for students as well. I know for myself, I didn't ever see myself engaging in civics. And so when I got the opportunity, it definitely opened doors for me, like joining BSU, advocating for the Black community, going to school board meetings. So I think it definitely not only links to students' interests, but I think it sparks new interest for students as well.
Civic education, before I actually went to AP government class, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. You know, I thought I wanted to go to medical school and not follow in the footsteps of my parents. But as I learned about the law and as I started to understand it and get familiar with it, I realized that that was something I love to do. And even though, you know, not everybody wants to be a lawyer, you know, civics always ties into your field that you want to go in. You know, doctors always have to be up to date with the laws. You know, doctors can do community service and help their communities. You know, everybody plays a role in civics, no matter what field you're in.
Excellent. So, you know, I have another question. In your opinion, right, like you guys are all talking about the importance of civics, the importance of civic engagement and understanding your role in our democratic republic. But I want to ask, like, in your opinion, are all students getting what they need from their civic education these days?
I think that students that go to disadvantaged schools aren't really getting what they need, mostly because, you know, some teachers might not be trained to teach that particular subject. You know, you have like football coaches and different people who are not trained to teach civics properly, teaching those classes, and those students aren't getting what they need in that way. They're also not learning how the laws apply to them, how to vote, how to pay taxes, all these things that we need going into adulthood that just aren't being checked off.
Anaya or Jaden?
Yeah, I could definitely agree with Alex on that. I think there's some things that are missing as far as civics for students. And as she mentioned, understanding how the law applies to them, understanding how they can lobby for certain things. And I think there's just certain important aspects that students aren't really understanding, especially how to apply civics in their real life. But I will say that I know based on my experience, a lot of teachers do make do with what they have and try to teach students to their best ability. Because I know it can be hard, especially with budget cuts and teachers not being trained to teach civics. So I think it's a situation that can be rough depending on where your school is. But I think there's definitely some things that need to improve.
We also need to acknowledge that some students aren't even getting civic education at all. The only thing they've ever experienced, maybe in their high school, is a government class. And that's not civics. That's kind of teaching you about how government works. It's not teaching you about how to be a good citizen or how to interact with your community in any way. And it definitely doesn't teach you how to register to vote or how to actually go down and vote. I had to do a voter registration kind of drive at my high school when I was there in the government classes because we didn't have civics classes. So that's something that really angers me there as well. But also civics can be applied throughout school, throughout any subject that we see. As I mentioned earlier, it's interdisciplinary, and really throughout whatever classroom that you're in, you should be able to apply civics to it in some way. And that can come in terms of like a project-based learning or community project-based learning or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. So I'm going to kind of ask you guys like a two-part question. You know, we're talking about this need for civic education, right? and it's missing in some schools. Some schools it's like almost there. What would you change about, you can even talk about your own civic learning experience, the civics or the government that you got at school, and then like which students are missing out. So where are the need areas? Like who do we need to target and who's not getting this?
I would like to start this one. So I really think just in general, the kids I've talked to across schools have said that they wish their civic education class were a little bit less biased. You know, so sometimes teachers, not to blame teachers, but they unwillingly bring their own opinions into it instead of letting students form their own opinions. And actually, I wanted to quote one of my teachers. It's always, year after year, it's harder to get smart students to do the more challenging class. And I feel like we need to remove the stigma that challenging classes are going to be harder and that you're going to fail and you're not going to get anything out of it, because I used to think that about AP government and I used to think that about civics. And I had a teacher who was willing to push me and was willing to tell me, hey, you need to do this. So I think, one, we need to start challenging our students more to take the harder government classes and to take harder classes, period, so that we can have people who are literate in the law and people who can go out into society and bring that change to other people.
Yeah, I think for myself, I would say two things that I think in civic classes, a lot of things that are missing are that in a civic class, usually a teacher will lecture it to you, you know, give you the prompts that you need to understand. And we're not really allowing students to hold a discussion in what they're learning and, you know, maybe issues that's going on in their community, in their lives that's related to civics. And so I think that there definitely needs to be a little bit more discussions going on between students. Civil discourse is really important, learning how to do consensus building. That's something that students definitely need to practice. I think another thing that's missing as well is action civics, because you may be learning something from a handbook, but students are not really sure how to actually apply it. How do you go and send out proper emails to the president of your school board? How are you contacting your local political officials? So I think there definitely needs to be some action civics in civic education, because that's something that a lot of students don't really get to experience. And I was lucky enough to, but unfortunately, a lot of students don't.
And also, just how are we going to teach students civics without them actually being engaged in the content that they're learning? And to that, I approach it with, we need more kind of student involvement in education itself. I come from a student voice background where we support students getting involved in creating education policy and education curriculum and making decisions based around what they want to learn as well. So taking that to a civic classroom, for at least for the schools that have the civic classroom, and allowing those students to become a part of their education is going to get them much more engaged in learning the content.
Oh, excellent points. So Alex and Anaya, you've managed this large social media campaign, Civics for Us, right? Where you guys have asked students, you guys went out with your groups, you asked students in 9 states and Puerto Rico what they think about equity in civic education. So can you guys just kind of give like 1 to 2 themes that are from your peers that stood out to you during this whole experience?
Yeah, so I just realized that students want to be heard. You know, they don't want to be pushed to sit down. They don't want to be pushed to be quiet. If a student has something to say, they want to be able to say it freely. And so basically, when I went to collect quotes, you know, I heard voices that I really didn't think were there. You know, I saw people in the hallway who I didn't even think cared about civics class and were taking the government's class just for a good grade. And they actually cared, you know. It's just, you need to inspire students to speak. And so I think that's what our campaign does. It really inspires students to stand up for yourselves, stand up for your classmates, and stand up for your voice. And also, I would say that even though some people will actually say they don't care about civics, they'll still make the jump to learn about it because they realize it's important. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Alex just made a perfect point of, and you know, since we're in the same organization, we've seen the same things. I would say another thing that while collecting quotes for me, I noticed that a lot of students actually didn't even have civics. And so a lot of students are interested in further investigating what does civics even mean? What is civics? How can I get involved in it? So I think a lot of students lack that opportunity to even engage in it. But I think another thing was, for me, I noticed that a lot of students had a lot of opinions on how their civic education can improve, what they want to see more of. And so that was something exciting to see, because a lot of the students don't seem interested, but I think that's because this conversation isn't brought up in class. So it was very interesting to see students be so excited about just spreading civic curriculums throughout schools and our world in general.
Awesome. So speaking of student voice, we're going to talk a little bit more about how civic education and civic learning experiences can elevate student voices throughout. Jaden, I'm going to have you start off, but this is a question for everyone. So the question is, like, do you feel heard, right? Like, we're talking about, like, student voice, right? Do you feel heard? Do you feel the adults in your lives work hard to empower you as collaborators and decision makers at school?
You know, if you'd asked me this while I was in high school, I probably would have given you a different answer. But now that I'm in college and I see and understand a lot of decisions that are being made at the university level about my education, it feels like there's a level of tokenization around students, especially given that we are given positions of student government, obviously, where we get to work with the administration on certain issues that we feel are important to us, but in the end, really, the person that makes the final decision is the university president, which does not make me feel like I'm being heard within my own university. And I've written pieces on this as well, on just the lack of legitimacy that is given to our student governing systems. And there's a spectrum of student partnership that we need to acknowledge, where on one end, students don't make any of the decisions and are not consulted in anything. And on the far end, where students have voting power and are given the same amount of decision-making power that the adults in the room are given. Or, I guess, administration is given, in my case being in college. And along that spectrum, we tend to fall somewhere in the middle almost every time, where students are consulted, but the decisions are made by other people. And that just does not sit well with me.
In my experience, I do feel heard sometimes. You know, I'm in student council, and although like the teacher that's in charge of it really tries to make us feel like, hey, you have a voice, we can still get overridden by administration on basically everything. You know, we have no real say, we have no real power. I feel like sometimes student government organizations are there to give that facade that you do have a power, you have a say in some things, but not everything. And it also goes back to what Jaden said. The big decisions are ultimately made by the administration. Students are not usually consulted. Student opinions aren't taken into consideration. Student feelings are never taken into consideration. At the end of the day, it's what makes the school look good, what makes parents want to enroll their kids here, even though that may not necessarily be what is best for the student body.
Yeah, I could definitely agree on that. I think that for myself, we definitely we're heard when it comes to things that benefits the school. So, you know, when there's a homecoming dance, you know, go ahead and put your input on that. Maybe a little bit of dress code, they might let you have a little bit of an input on that. But when it comes to things that is very important to us, and now it's time for us to take action, and we want our administrators and our teachers to back us up, I definitely think that I haven't been heard, and there's been plenty of times where I've gone to my principal's office and asked for things, and you know, it's brushed to the side. They might put a sticky note on it, and you feel as if like they might be taking what you're saying into consideration. But then there's weeks that pass and nothing has happened. So I think that while it may seem like students are being heard, it's only to a certain extent, and it's limited.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question. So what's one way, like just one example, where adults could possibly improve, you know, so that these relationships with students, as far as decision making is concerned, can be strengthened?
I would like to take this because I saw this in high school as well, and I took action on it. We actually got a student representative on our local school board so that at the highest level, students can be making decisions about our community's education and have input on the kind of policy decisions that we're making. And from what I've heard, it's been, I believe, 2 years now. It's been an amazing partnership between the school board and the student body, where the student body feels like they're being heard more often, not all the time, but definitely more often than they were before. And the school board gets a lot more, they get a peer into the lives of students because some of them may not even have kids of their own, and they don't often go and visit the school. So really putting students on school boards, I think, is something that needs to be done nationwide. And we already see movements for it. I know it's been happening in California since the 60s and everything, and they are above 50%. So if we can get states to even start mandating a non-voting school board member on school boards across their states, like that is a great first step to take.
In my opinion, I think that that the administration just needs to go around and just ask students. You know, there's never any administrator that says, hey, we have this new dress code rule and we want to know what you think about it. And, you know, actually taking notes and writing down what students are saying. Nobody is doing that. And so when they come up with this new rule, students get upset because they're like, nobody told us about this. Nobody asked our opinions, and it's affecting our lives. It's affecting us every day. And it's not just the dress code decisions, it's the homecoming weeks, it's the football games, the big stuff, graduations, baccalaureate dinners, like all this stuff is getting affected and we have absolutely no say. And it feels like sometimes that you don't have any control over your high school life. And so really take notes, please, like ask us. I promise we don't bite. We just want to feel heard.
Exactly. I think that just to tie back to what Jaden and Alex said, something that needs to happen more of is student and teacher collaboration. And I think this is a problem because a lot of times teachers may feel like, you know, you're the authority, so I don't really owe an explanation to a student. But I think instead of looking at it that way, let's bring our teacher power and influence and our students' powers and influence together so that students can be heard and teachers can be too. I think this collaboration can bring a lot more change in our school community. So if we combine those and there's a relationship that's built, there's trust that's built, and there's a collaboration, I feel like a lot more students will be heard and it won't feel so much like there's this boundary and authority that's going on.
So I have another follow-up to that that's kind of off of our script, but you know, how do these type of experiences that you guys mentioned as examples of, you know, elevating student voices within school decisions, how do these reflect then equitable civic practices?
Make students want to get up and it makes students want to protest. You know, like the March for Our Lives, that type of thing. Make students want to get up and protest and tell people and make adults hear us. This is our voice. This is our education. We need to have a stake in it. And it's just, you need to give students a voice. And when students don't feel heard, they're going to rise up and they're going to take action. And we need to promote some of that civil discourse that's happening. You know, let's let the students have a walkout if they want to walk out. Because I remember at my school when the March for Our Lives was happening, they wouldn't let us leave school to protest. We had to check ourselves out. And I feel like stuff like that, the school is also affected. So you need to allow us to protest. It's not only for student safety, it's for teacher safety, it's for everybody. You know, some of the things students want accomplished is actually going to make the school better and make it more appealing to people. And so I really feel like just let your students be heard. Just ask them if they feel heard, and they'll give you an honest answer.
Yeah, I also think this just makes students feel included. I know, like for me, being in 8th grade, at my school, for one, we had a school that was in the middle of being shut down. We had a lot of things that was going on. Test scores weren't being met. And so when we were able to have Generation Citizen come and teach us a little bit about civics, and we had students listening to us and us also learning from we had teachers listening to us and we were able to learn from our teachers. I think students became inspired and they felt a part of a conversation that for many years, a lot of underrepresented students hasn't been a part of the conversation. So I think it makes students feel included. And now you gain this confidence, you become inspired to do the things that you may have felt like you were unable to do, or you didn't feel included at one point.
Yeah, and I just read a book called Private Government by Elizabeth Anderson, and she goes into depth on how workplaces end up being, or at least becoming, kind of dictatorships in a way, where everything is ruled by one authority. And schools are kind of the same way, where that one authority is the administration that you see. And when students' opinions are not being taken into account for anything, it becomes more of a dictatorship. But when you include students in the conversation, partner with students in the conversation, not just listen to them, then it becomes a more democratic institution. It becomes more equitable. It becomes more of what we see in our current government. And if we're trying to reflect the democratic values that our country holds, we need to be able to include students in the conversations that affect them the most, because no taxation without representation? I mean, no education without representation. We need to start thinking about putting students into the conversation, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward.
All right, all great points. So essentially, you guys are literally begging the case or pleading the case for schools to situate themselves as democratic institutions so that students can practice. I want to make sure I sum up all of these points. All right. So I'm doing a decently eloquent job. All right, so my next question is for everyone. It is, what is the easiest way to get students engaged in their communities, in politics, or in civic life? This is a question for everyone. So like the easiest way to get students engaged in their community, in politics, or in civic life.
Right now, being a part of Equity Youth Fellowship, I'm going to say social media, only because I think this is where a lot of students have learned about issues that's going on around the world, where a lot of students has probably joined campaigns that they've never imagined themselves joining. So I think social media has been a big outlet and a big influence for this generation in particular. And so like for us, being in Civics Equity Fellowship, we use our social media platform to elevate student voice, but to also get them involved, get them interested in civics. And I think we also kind of provide a resource that, maybe there's not civics in certain schools, or you don't get that in your school environment. So now you have a chance to learn civics, and you can join, Equity Fellowship or Generation Citizen. So I think that's a really big way right now to get students involved.
I really hope there are parents or teachers watching, because all you need to do is give them a push. You are the ones that are around them the most. You know what they're passionate about. You know what they care about. Give them that push. Get them involved in what they care about. If they really, really care about gun rights, like, give them that push. There's organizations out there that are issue organizing, or tell them that there is a certain candidate that aligns with their political beliefs, and they can go out and knock on doors or make phone calls for them. Really, the people that we need to be asking to push these students are the ones that are closest to them. And teachers, you spend 8 hours a day with your students. So definitely reaching out and just giving them that extra push.
Just be that teacher that just wants to support their students and support their interests, or even push them. I had a freshman geography teacher who wanted me to take AP Gov, like basically cornered me in the classroom. It's like, you need to take this class. You are smart enough to take this class. You are talented. Please take the class. Be that Mr. Moore, the teacher that corners their students until they take the class. Be that Dr. Cambry who pushes you to do a program that you never thought you would get into. Be that teacher who challenges your students every day to go beyond what they think of themselves.
Yeah, and if I could hop into that really quick, because I know for myself as well, I probably wouldn't be here without my teacher's push and my parents' push. And I wouldn't have gotten started in civics at all. I wasn't, but my teacher and one of the Generation Citizen members came up to me and was like, nope, you're going to put your name on this paper and this is what you're going to do. So I think sometimes if you let students know you believe in them, it can make a big difference, because sometimes students just don't have that confidence. to do it themselves.
Awesome. So I'm gonna, again, go off topic just a little bit, but so all of you guys are obviously super passionate about civic engagement, student voice, civic education, and participating in politics and government and all of that. But, obviously you do have classmates and peers who either they are not excited about it or they don't know about it. So what are some of the ways that you or people, students like you, can reach out and make sure that you're providing space for other students and to introduce them to opportunities like this?
Okay, so as a former athlete, it's like you relate to what they like. If a student likes TV, say, hey, there's this great documentary on Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime that I think would really interest you. Combine interests. Interests are always intertwined in someone's beliefs. If someone likes sports, tie civics into sports and show how athletes are civically engaged while also maintaining their careers. Athletes like Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant, Colin Kaepernick, Alicia Glass, they're all so civically engaged. And so you can be that athlete that does both. Also encouraging community service within school. So key clubs, student councils, my student council does a shepherd's market where we donate hunted meat, game, deer to the local food banks before Thanksgiving. Just doing those little things can help students get engaged.
Yeah, I can agree with Alex on that. I think when you combine student interests with civics, it makes it a whole lot better. But I think also introducing students to resources, organizations, campaigns, sometimes it can make it a little bit more fun for students, especially when they can go on and find a campaign that maybe is advocating for something that they believe in. It can kind of give students that inspiration to join and find something that is important or fun to them in civics.
I had friends who were not interested in student voice or civics at all, and I'm involved in a lot of our organizations with them that provide a lot of opportunities to get involved, and so I just force them into it. There's really no better way to get a student involved than reaching out to your own network and saying, I think you'd be a really good fit for this, even if they would be a terrible fit for it. Like, you're bringing them into the conversation, and then once they're a part of it, they can't really get out of it. I've done this with a couple close friends, and they're like, "Oh, thank you so much. This changes how I see the world, and how I think about the issues that I encounter." So, a really good way of bringing students into the conversation is pulling them into the conversation.
Awesome. So I think I'm going to ask you guys one more question, maybe two, and then open it up to our participants to see if they have anything that they want to say or ask you guys. So in this couple of seconds or minutes, please think of a couple questions that you would like to ask our students. So my question to you guys is, what we talk a lot about building partnerships between adults and students, and students not having a real voice in the interworkings of the school community. So what are some apprehensions that adults might have for holding on to, we don't want to let students participate in decision making?
So we're young, you wouldn't want to trust a 16-year-old, voting for president, things like that. Things that are serious that impact everyday life, and you wouldn't want, just the basic things. We're young, we're unexperienced, we haven't really lived our lives, gone out and protested. At least I haven't. I don't know about the rest of you, but I haven't done many of the things that my parents and even my grandparents have done. I haven't lived through the things my parents and my grandparents have lived through. And that makes me a little bit less experienced than them. But I definitely have learned from my parents and my grandparents to do my research, to talk to people who may be knowledgeable about what I'm trying to engage in or get my foot into the door in, so I can be prepared. And while they might not think we're responsible enough or old enough or, you know, anything knowledgeable enough, we're learning from them. So really, all the things that the past generations have taught us or have done, we're learning from constantly every day, you know, through the internet, through books, you know. So I would really just say, give us a chance, you know. We're working hard for it, so you should just, you know, at least try it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that they just look at us as inexperienced. We haven't lived enough life. I think they're stuck in their ways as well. You know, they feel like I'm the adult. You can't even vote yet, so how are you sitting over here giving me your opinion? But I think what a lot of our adults fail to realize is that a lot of the things that's going on, issues, things that we see on the news, laws that are passed are directly affecting our lives and our futures. So I think it's a little selfish to say that we shouldn't have a say or at least be able to express our opinions for it. And so I just think a lot of adults don't look at it in that way. They just look at it as a students, you know, being immature, ignorant.
When you think about why the King of England didn't give up power for people to start their own country, you think about it in terms of power and of authority. It's a little bit of the same instance here, where we have people who are leading schools who say, you know, I have all the power, I have all the authority. If you bring more people in the conversation, your power and authority is diminished in a way. You're not able to make decisions as easily because you have more stakeholders that you have to listen to. And when your stakeholders are the ones that are basically running the schools, with having 800 students in a high school or something for a small high school like mine, you far outnumber all the teachers. So you're going to hear their voices way more often than you will hear the voices of parents or something else. So imagine that you say something that those students don't agree with, and they all find a way to organize. Suddenly that's scary, because now you have 800 students who want something, and they're all gunning for you, protest you. We see these examples with, especially here in Iowa a couple of years ago. There was an instance where a substitute teacher who was gay was not offered a job at a Catholic high school, and so students protested. And that's very scary for administration to see, because you don't expect students to organize with each other. So I think that's just a main reason, is consolidating power and authority within one person rather than delegating it out to your stakeholders.
So then how would civic education provide a space for students to channel that energy? Like how, you know, give an example of like then how would a relevant civic education give students that space?
I mean, I can just keep going off of this point too, because I think it ties in so well. Once you start teaching students about civics, how to be a good citizen, what your rights are, especially, that is a big one, that you have the right to protest, that you have the right to freedom of speech, all of these things that we really take for granted and don't use a lot. Once you teach students about these things and show them examples of when people have done these in the past, I always look towards the Chicano movement, the East LA walkouts, where we see students who were protesting the inadequacy of their education. And I don't know if they were being taught about civics, but even in that case, if you're teaching students about civics and showing them examples of how people are using it, they're going to take those examples and run with them and use them for their own ends and for what they're passionate and what they believe in.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Look, Jaden, you're making it seem like, oh my God, that's a bad thing. Like you got to spin it, right? Like how is that positive, right? Like
it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Okay.
From a student perspective of organizing and protesting, and Alex, going back to what you said earlier, I have protested. I've been arrested for protesting. It is a crazy feeling. and just students organizing and putting their power together, we make it seem like it's a bad thing. Like when you look at unions as well, union organizing, union power, it's great for the majority, but it's not so great for the people that are trying to consolidate their power. But that's why we need to change how we're thinking about these situations. We need to change the thoughts of it's us versus them, because it's not. It's a partnership between teachers, administrators, and students. Everybody needs to be working together because they all have the same goal. They want their students to learn well. And students are not out to assassinate their education. They want to learn. They just want to have a voice in learning it. So we need to change the narrative from this being an us versus them conversation to a partnership conversation.
Anyone else have anything to add before we ask questions?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of add on to Jaden. I'm sorry, Alex, did you want to go? Okay, yeah, I was just going to kind of add on to what Jaden was talking about as far as changing the narrative to make it into a positive thing. Because if you really look at it, when students have civics and they're able to now establish these protests, these walkouts, these campaigns, they've done a lot of things that adults can't even do. So, you know, we've had students do a walkout for climate change. We've had students do March for Our Lives, and they've built a lot of awareness on things that's extremely important that our adults just didn't have enough power to do. So I think that, you know, when we have students in power, that's not always a bad thing. We're not going to abuse our power. I think that we can create a lot more change and influence, especially for students who may not be aware of the things that's going on or may not have that drive to speak out about things that are important to them.
I believe that student-led and student-based organization and protests have actually worked. You know, in the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, you know, during the Freedom Rise, during Freedom Summer, they used students, you know, the student non-conventional coordinating transition, I think that's what it's called. Sorry, Dr. Zake, if it's not. They used students to go protest what was happening, you know, police brutality, civil rights. There were college students sitting in lunch counters getting hot drinks poured on them because they just wanted to sit there and have a drink or sit there and eat food, you know? So anytime a student has gotten involved in something that they're passionate about, some change has happened in the years coming. You know, Brown v. Board with Linda Brown. Linda Brown made a huge difference, even if she was, 5 or 6 at the time. Ruby Bridges made a huge, ripple in Louisiana's schooling because she integrated a school in such horrible conditions. So always, students are the ones testing the water. Students are the ones we experiment on. And that may not be such a bad thing because students are able to adapt easier. So anytime we've seen any major change in history, it's been because a student jumped in and did something, or jumped in and integrated a school, or jumped in and tried to integrate a lunch counter.
Awesome. So it sounds like an equitable civic education needs to be infused with the voices of the students who are experiencing that civic education, along with encouraging them to participate long-term. I just want to tie it into a nice, neat little bow. All right, hopefully I did that. Your smiles make me feel like I did. So let's see if there are any questions. I don't know if there are.
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions that have come in. So Mary Ellen asks, I often find when I give my students real voice and choice, they don't believe me, or at least it seems that way. I love the idea of student school board members because I want students to actually have agency. How can I get kids excited about something as boring as school board meetings?
So I guess I'd like to start this one. So first of all, I love how you like the idea of having students on the school board. You know, I think all three of us agree with that idea. I think the reason why students are scared and don't use their power and their voices because we're constantly, you know, feeling like we're going to have our voice taken at some point. You know, social media, you know, sometimes they shut us down when we try to start something. You know, administration, you know, if something gets a little too out of hand, it gets shut down. You know, things are constantly getting shut down. The March for Our Lives movement eventually had to get shut down at some places, even the student activism in the 1960s. So honestly, just tell your students that this is a place where you can speak and you can use your voice in a positive and constructive way so that you can make a change. you know, have your students come together, do a project. My teacher used to do projects all the time where we would find new ways to, like, a new way to solve an old problem. And so if you do stuff like that, students become more engaged, like up here in class, you know, they start coming up with new ideas. When you're teaching something, they're constantly coming up with something new. And then that gets them involved, that gets them engaged, and they want to go to those boring school board meetings. I've never been to a school board meeting. I don't have a school board, but you know, I mean, that helps.
Yeah, I think just to add on to Alex as well, I know at my school we make flyers for upcoming school board meetings, and I know when students are allowed to interact in those flyers and make them themselves, they become a little bit more determined to attend it. So I think, you know, finding ways to get your students involved also creatively will definitely get them excited as well.
Going back to what Alex just said, project-based learning is a huge one for just getting students involved more generally with their education. It's fantastic to have them experience or look through what they're passionate about. But aside from that, getting students to be more passionate about boring school board meetings and everything, you need to open up to your students a little bit more. You see, I'm imagining myself in a position 5 years from now where I'm a teacher and I'm trying to figure out, you know, how do I get students involved in what's going on at school? And the only way that I can imagine doing that is sharing with them the problems that I'm experiencing due to the school board and the things that we want to change, and talking with them about, you know, here's what's going on in the school right now. Here's like where my position is on it. Here's where an opposing position is on it. What do you guys think that we should do? And engaging them in those conversations. Once they've engaged in those conversations during class or during random conversations during a planning period or something like that, then they're going to be more interested in going to one of those meetings and experiencing what it is. And school board meetings are boring. I don't really know anybody that likes to go to school board meetings in their free time. So, but it's not unless there's actually something on the agenda that is really important and people come out in droves for. If you want to get students to go to school board meetings more generally, definitely talk about your experience.
So we have another question that was sparked by Jaden's example about the substitute teacher. And they're wondering if you feel that in terms of student voice, that students who identify with marginalized communities are less likely to be heard and given a voice.
So I believe that this is true. You know, I'm part of the Latino community, I'm part of the Black community. And time again, I see people of both of my cultures being shut down, being marginalized, being told to sit down and just be happy that you're here. You know, happy that you get to witness the conversation, not technically be a part of it, you know. And it really, I don't know, it makes me think back to Dred Scott. So how he was told, hey, you can't even sue, you're not a citizen, why are you even here? You know, that kind of thing. I'm trying to loop this back to the question, but I feel like a lot of marginalized students just feel like you're disregarded. It constantly happens in history, but we can change that. And honestly, if you just add more diverse teachers, you know, all teachers are amazing. I love all my teachers. Like, I love them. I didn't have my first African-American teacher until I was in 8th grade, like my first grade school teacher. I would have loved to see a teacher that looked like me, believed in some of the things I believed, you know, and even like having gay teachers, like those help the students that identify as gay by, you know, whatever they affiliate as, you know. You always have to have a teacher that you can go back and relate to, because those are the teachers that honestly I bounce my ideas off of. I bounce my ideas off of my favorite English teacher in the whole wide world, and she's that person I can go talk to and be like, hey, is this a good idea? Be that teacher for your students. Even if you're not in a part of those groups, try to understand their perspectives and try to make them feel less marginalized, less put in that box. You know, just try to make them come out of the box and express their views and express their ideas. That helps a community become less marginalized and more just out and being a part of the conversation and demanding a spot. on the table, a seat at the table.
You all have mentioned social media in some of your answers. We have a question. Do you think that social media or in-person protests are more effective, and do both have their place?
This is a really good question. I don't know. I feel like for myself, based on experience, I feel like in-person protest has been a lot more effective to me and impactful, just because now people are forcefully feeling the pressure of students. Like, there's so many things that we post on social media daily, and it may not be as big or get a lot of people's attention, but I think when you have students who's outside a classroom during a school day, now you have people driving by and they see all these students being very adamant in what they want. I think it creates a lot of pressure. So I think that it's a little bit more effective just because there's a physical action going on. And I think a lot of teachers and our adults just don't believe students would do it.
I'm going to piggyback right off of that and say pressure, pressure, pressure. There is pressure in numbers, and you can measure numbers better when you can see them all in one place rather than through social media, where you can just see like, well, profile pictures that start to change to a certain color for some cause or something like that. Like, it's hard to protest over social media because the act of protest is putting yourself in some sort of risk. At least that's how I usually picture it. When I was protesting at the Harvard-Yale game for climate action, we saw students coming out of the stands that were not part of the original protest group. It ended up being 500 students when we'd only started with maybe 100. And just the power of seeing how many people were wanting to be involved was so much better than doing it over social media or something. We recently did an Earth Day rally for that same divestment campaign. I'm going to be honest with you, wasn't as good as doing it in person because you're around other people. You feel the energy. Online, you don't really feel that energy. When people are talking, like sometimes they could be talking from a script and you get bored really quick.
I think I've never been protesting, like I said, but I think in person would probably be better. You know, what are you more likely to see? 1,000 students protesting outside the state capitol, or are you going to see 1,000 Instagram posts that have like a 5% chance of making it on your For You page, your Explore page, whatever you have? You know, you can easily turn off your phone and ignore it. When there's students standing outside your door, screaming at you, chanting, holding up their signs, it's impossible to ignore. You're gonna have to go out there and address it. Social media, you can ignore it for however long you want to. It's still gonna be there when you get back.
Alex, that is such a good point because with social media, we're screaming into our own echo chambers.
Besides school board representation, where else would you want students to have a real role in school administration, and how would you want that structured?
So I would like to see student representatives in administration when they're making decisions. So I don't go to a traditional school. We don't have a school board. We're our own district. So I'd like to see students in administration meetings. So teachers and administration have a meeting every month where they just come together and they discuss the issues. I feel like we should have some students there to just get some student input in there, get some student voice in there, you know, because sometimes decisions are made and students might not appreciate that decision. So I think if you have a student there to be like, hey, if we switch this around or we add this in there or, you know, we flip the script a little bit, students could actually get behind this. And always student reps can go talk to students, survey students. It's that person that's going to be there when, like, hey, I want to talk to you about this rule. How does this work, you know, or how can we get this changed? That student rep can be there and talk to administration about it. So it's not like a bunch of students going to administration at once, protesting, overwhelming them. So just having 1 or 2 students there to represent the group would be a really good idea.
I think you can really make a statement by calling an assembly, getting everybody in one room together, and just start talking about your ideas. Talk about what you want to see in the school change. You need to have an honest conversation with the students so that they realize that something is actually serious. How you do that is up to what technology is available to you and what things you feel would work best. But I think getting every student involved in the conversation is very, very important. Because when you pick a select group, students may resent that group or resent the administration for not including them as well. Whether you try to do organize breakout sessions, maybe with a couple teachers per 20 students or so, and having a conversation about what you'd like to see change. School culture is something that students notice a lot more than teachers notice, I feel like. Just because they're living the experience every day, and they have a lot of opinions about what they want to change. And having an open and honest conversation about that is the first step to getting that change.
I actually agree with what Jaden said, because, you know, when you hear about a change, you hear it from an email. I don't personally read my email as often as I probably should. I personally don't see the personal touch to an email. I'd rather my school or my teacher just come up to me or come up to a group of students and be like, hey, this rule is now a rule. How do you feel about it? Should we change it just a little bit to cater to your needs? You know, not just the let's type out a quick email, let's blast send it to the school, and that's it. You know, add something personal to it. Even what Jaden said, just having breakout sessions, that really, really helps. You know, I feel like if I can just get my opinion out there and get my voice out there, at least I was heard, and at least something was taken into consideration, or they took away something from it. So stuff like that really, really helps.
Yeah, I think Jaden and Alex pretty much hit it right on the head with both of these. Assemblies work, and of course, if those can't, if you can't do an assembly, moving those conversations to the classroom, just to make sure that every student is getting a chance to state their opinions and be heard.
With that as well, we had a question about, do you think students should have a role in helping to create their curriculum?
Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. I am lucky enough to have gone to one meeting with one of my teachers to discuss curriculum. And I don't think they really understand how important it is for students to be there, because I don't really understand how adults can kind of alter our curriculum and they're not the ones learning it. So I think it's very essential that students are there to have an input on what's working for them, what's not working for them, what are things they want to see in their classrooms. I mean, there's really not much to say. Like, yes, we need to be there.
See Jaden getting so excited about this question.
This is my number one. This is my number one. Students need to be involved in the creation of curriculum. Oh my gosh, I cannot stress this enough. There are things that students want to learn about in a structured environment that they don't get to learn about. I learned about COINTELPRO, which was basically like the intelligence community messing up the civil rights movement and getting in with the Black Panther Party and all of those things. I never learned that in school. I never learned about student protests in school. I never learned about student activists in school. There are so many things across all different disciplines that students want to learn about, and they're always passionate about something. So they need to be involved in the creation of curriculum. And I advocate very, very highly for project-based learning, because that is a step that you can take within your current educational situation, whether that be like Common Core or something else, SAT charter or private schools as well, that you can actually implement without having to get permission for. So if you make your final project like or your final paper or something like a project-based learning, do whatever you want. You can make a slideshow, you can make a poster board, you can make blah, 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 blah. You have to have this much information included and show that you actually need effort for it. Students will go crazy for it. And I've seen students go crazy for it too. Yeah.
I 100% believe that students need to be involved in creating their curriculum. I am so lucky to be part of an IB program at my school, so International Baccalaureate. My IB coordinator, Dr. Robillard, actually does a great job of sitting down with us, asking us what we think needs to be changed. It's student-paced. So we go very deep if we want to, or we don't, if we don't want to, you know. Also, my teachers do surveys at the end of the year. You know, what do you think we could change? What do you think we could make better? What do you want to learn next year? And personally, for me, if I had a choice about what would be incorporated in my curriculum, it would be more Black history, because this year was the first year I've ever heard of Marcus Garvey. And I'm kind of upset about it. But like, even then, just ask students what they want to learn and like, it doesn't even have to be every year, because I know every class wants something different, and it's hard to change your curriculum every single year, but at least every few years, give it a fresh look or a little update. And that's what IB did when students wanted a fresh look, and that's what happened. So I believe that should really happen.
And along with that, we also understand that there are restrictions. You have to adhere to certain Common Core standards. You have to prepare students for assessments and all those things. That's a whole different conversation, but that needs to be reformed in and of itself. And it can be overwhelming when you have 180 students that you have to teach, and you're like, I can't cater to the needs of every single student that I teach. So going class by class would probably be a great way to just start showing that you care about what they want to learn about. Asking students, maybe in a survey, posing them with more options of like, you know, here's something extra that we can learn about that I can add into the curriculum. What do you want to do? And seeing how that goes, and starting the implementation slow so that it doesn't overwhelm yourself.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So an hour flew by like super fast. But I hope that each and every person who was here this evening got at least a few valuable bits of information from our awesome students. I just want to thank Alex, Anaya, and Jaden so very much for being vulnerable with each and every one of us and sharing you know, what you guys know about equity, about civic education, about student voice, about student civic engagement, and also about partnerships between adults and students. Because I think at the end of the day, as Jaden very eloquently stated, you know, this is not about us versus them. This is about all of us here together, collaboratively working toward making civic society that works better and well for everyone. With that, we will leave you guys. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your evening. Please share any insights that you had. Use the hashtag Civics for us. And thank you for joining us.